Hello everyone, today I'd like to introduce you to Roku Test Automation, or RTA for short. RTA is a powerful tool that can help you release code more confidently and catch bugs earlier than waiting for final QA regression testing. So what is RTA? It's an NPM package that assists in accessing and setting state on the Roku device. It includes the following components: ECP, which handles remote input, deep linking, and media player status; network proxy, which allows inspecting and modifying network requests; the on-device component, which is kind of the heart of RTA, includes so these are just some of the common ones: get value, set value. In this case, we have a get value for something off of the scene, with a key path of page with an ID of home page, and we're looking at the visibility of it. So basically, we want to see when the home page is visible. On-field change once. So instead of having to set an arbitrary delay with like a sleep, on-field change once can let you wait for something to happen, and then as soon as that happens, we proceed. We don't have to sleep. So that can really help speed up your test. So in this case, we have an auth manager checking to see if the user's logged in, and once that value is true, we're immediately going to proceed. If you're familiar with call func in BrightScript, this is the same thing, just exposed for testing. So in this case, we have a math manager with a function called multiply numbers, and basically these are the params, so we could check and make sure that the result of that was 15 as an example. And there's many more: get focus node, has focus, is in focus chain, read registry, write registry, delete registry sections, among many others. But these are some of the more common ones that you're going to be using. So the way that on-device component works is very similar to Rail, if you're familiar with or if you've used that before. So basically, we import the ODC component, and then we're going to give it a command. In this case, we want to get the currently focused node. So then we're going to make a request. It's done using a TCP socket with the Roku's IP address on port 9000. Request gets sent to the device. The task receives it. In this case, it's something that can't be handled by the task, so it gets passed to the on-device component render thread component. Then when we get the result, it gets sent back to the task, and that gets sent back to the client, and then we can actually respond to that here. So now you know the basics of how RTA works. We're going to try and do some tests with it today, and for that I decided to use a open source project called Playlet. Okay, so we're here in Visual Studio Code. I've pulled down the Playlet project code. And the first thing we need to do is go ahead and npm install Roku Test Automation. And that's all we need for the actual use of RTA. But obviously you're going to need some type of testing framework or something that you're going to write your tests with. For the Roku community, we use Mocha and Chai normally for our tests, so I'm going to be using those. But it's important to know that these aren't requirements for RTA. This is just how I'm writing the test. I like to say that RTA is just a tool, and you're choosing how you're going to use it. So let's go ahead and install those. All right, so now that those are installed, we need to actually go ahead and get an RTA config going here. Let's see here. So there's one in the Roku Test Automation sample test project. So I'm just going to copy that as a start. And that just goes at the base of the project. So rta-config.json. And I'll paste that in. And really the only things we need here are the host and the password. Basically this is what's going to allow us to deploy to the device. So basically, we need to change this a little bit. This is for a different device, so I'm going to change the IP address here, 174. And the other thing, you can do some more advanced things like giving properties and specifying which device you want to use for a test. But we're just going to give it a name of 4802. It's Ultra 4802. So now that our RTA config is set up, we need to go ahead and make a folder where we're going to store our automated test. So let's go ahead and do that. And one of the first things you're going to need to be able to do is obviously deploy to the device. So generally the way we do this in Mocha is we make an include file. And I'll just go ahead and copy this over again. Remember, this is specific to your testing framework, but basically what we're trying to do is we need to be able to deploy to the device. And you can do this other ways. The easiest way to do this is just using the device.deploy, which is basically going to inject the necessary files that we're going to be using. And we also use this helper to set up the environment from the config file. It'll try and do that automatically, but it's just a little bit better to go ahead and specifically call that. So now we got our include set up. We're going to go ahead and make some changes to our package.json as well. We're just going to add a section for giving some Mocha specific settings. Number one, obviously these are automated tests, not unit tests, so they're going to be quite a bit slower. Obviously, hopefully we're not going 2 minutes with our tests, but you want to give like a decent upper limit to, avoid your test getting canceled too early. And then we're using TypeScript for our tests, so we're going to use tsnode register to set that up. And we're including the include file that we just made, so basically that'll get run each time. And for some better integration with VS Code, we're going to go ahead and go to our launch.json, and we're going to add some new launch target. All right. And now we're ready to actually write a test. So we're going to add new file. We're doing the test on the search screen, so I'm just doing search TS. And I'm just going to put some boilerplate here. All right, so we've imported the Roku Test Automation, ECP, ODC, and utils. And then we're just setting up chai expect. And basically we have an outer search where we're going to pull all of our tests. And we have our first test here. Should be able to find and play a video from search. And I'll play the next video properly. So you can see down here we have this here. At this point we probably should be able to actually go ahead and deploy this. So run automated test. You should see it deploy here. So let's go over what we're actually going to do here. So the first thing we're going to do, application is going to load. We need to wait for that to complete. Once it's loaded, we want to navigate over to the search screen. So left, up, and then once we're on the search screen, we want to put in some description for a video. We want to select it, autoplay it, fast forward it to the end, and then go to the next one. So let's start running our test. For starters, we're just going to use a sleep to keep it simple. Let's see, I don't think 5,000 will be enough. Probably need more, around 10. And this is the issue with sleeps, is that you don't know how long it's going to take. It obviously varies from device to device. But we're going to sleep, and then we're going to do left, up, and OK to get on the settings screen. So we'll save that. We can go and run this and make sure we get to the settings screen. Now you notice that we had to wait there some, and that's what I was saying, obviously sometimes the device is slower like that, so we need to have some buffer there to make sure that it's not going to try and start doing this navigation before the page is loaded. So we want to start using the on-device component, so we need to do one more thing in order to make use of that. We need to actually inject our component, and this is something that we're actually working on to try and hopefully avoid you having to do in the near future, but for now, basically, you need to add a reference to the RTA on-device component. In main or scene are the two main spots you would normally do that. All right, so once that's in there, we should be able to go ahead and run this. And we want to actually use VS Code in order to actually find something that we can use to actually use the on-field change once to be able to wait until that thing is available and then immediately proceed. So we have the Roku device view down here. We got the scene graph inspector over here. If you're just starting out, it should be under the run and debug section. I basically just moved these over because I like this layout better. I can make this much bigger, have like a side-by-side arrangement there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click this to select. And we're going to try and find something that would be available at the start of the application. So we're obviously navigating over to the left side, so we're going to use that as something we're going to check for. And so this looks pretty good with the item list. So once we have that, we can come up here, click the key icon to get the key path for it. So we can take that, and we could actually just write this in line in our code here. But one of the things that's helpful when you're writing automated tests is to actually have a comment spot where you're building elements so that you can reuse those. So we're going to have elements here, and we're going to go ahead and call this side menu, and we're just going to take the key path here. We could also give the base as well, but there's really no need for that because since 2.0 we've made scene the default one since you're doing that most of the time. All right, so we have a key path there, and then we can also, if we want, we can actually give this a comment here. Side nav menu. You could come up with something more descriptive or useful. But basically the nice thing with this is when we actually use it in our test, when you're searching for an element, that can help with knowing what that is. So let's go ahead and add the elements to our test here. And then now instead of having to do this the sleep here, we can go ahead and replace that with our on-field change once. So basically we're taking the element side nav menu, which as you can see gives us that nice little comment there. If you were searching, you would have each of your elements show up there with a comment, which is really nice. And then we're matching it on the field visible, and we're looking for that to be true. Basically what we're kind of doing here, right now the match logic is pretty basic. It has to be an actual equal operator. So basically we're looking for something that we can match on to basically hold things up until that's visible, and then we can proceed with our test. So now if we go and run this, we should notice that it doesn't have to wait nearly as long in order for us to get to the settings screen. Once it's loaded here, it should be pretty much instantaneous. You notice how fast that was. All right, so now let's actually put in some text for getting a test. And obviously this is a Roku conference. So we're actually going to look for the Roku 2023 Developer Summit. Okay, so for the rest of this test, we're going to kind of do it two different ways. We're going to do it like a simpler way with just some basic sleeps and stuff like that. And then we're going to rewrite it using some of the more advanced functionality in RTA. So I'm just going to paste some code here. So we'll talk through it. So we have to wait for the search suggestions to be available. So we're going to wait 4 seconds there. Then we're going to say left, then OK. Now we have to wait for the search results to be available. We're waiting 2 seconds there, pressing OK. Then we're waiting 9 seconds in order for the videos to actually start playing. That can obviously take quite a while depending on your connection speed. Then we're going to press fast forward, fast forward, fast forward, same way a user would. Then we wait for us to get to the very end of the video. Once we're at the end of the video, we're going to press play again, and we're going to do some checks with the ECP media player, making sure that that the current position is greater than the duration minus 15 seconds, basically ensuring we're at the end. Then we're going to sleep 15 seconds there to allow it to finish playing the current one and start playing the next one. And then we're going to do some checks here to make sure that we are again playing and that the current position is less than 15 seconds. So that's one way to do it. That's a little bit simpler. The issue is even with these values might seem like they're pretty high for the amount you have to wait. If you get a slow connection or like that, it could very easily still fail the test because you're not giving it long enough. All right, so I'm just going to replace this. We're pretty much the same up to this point. We made search text a variable, and we're going to search for that. Then we're going to make sure that the first result suggestion actually is what we search for, and we're going to, as soon as that's the case, say left OK. Now we're actually looking that the piece of content in the first search result is what we're expecting it to be with a known video ID. Theoretically, at that point, we should be able to go ahead and select that content to play right away. However, I was having where it was sometimes failing on me. So basically, wrote a helper that basically retry with timeout, that it's basically trying to see if it has focus over and over. As soon as it has focus, it's going to proceed. Once it has focus, then we're going to press OK, which is going to start video playback. We're making sure that video is playing back here. Then at that point, we're going to use get value to get the duration of the currently playing video content. Then we're going to use set value, and we're going to set that duration, set seek to that duration to basically fast forward. And at this point, we're basically just waiting for the next video to start playing. We know what that video ID is, so we're going to verify that the next video matches what we expect it to be. So we're using get value over and over. Same with has focus, same way we did there. And then we're doing one final check here, just making sure that the actual content started playing properly. So let's go ahead and run this. Waiting for it. Okay. And next piece of content played. Now, I don't know if you noticed, it's funny, every time you run this, it's a little bit different. That one actually took quite a bit longer, so it seems like we're having some network connection issues. The other test still passed properly. It took longer, but it still passed. So basically, by us using these on-field change once and some of these things they're retrying, we overcome the issue of sleeps where even though you might have set 15 seconds for something, the network was slow, the test failed because of that. So basically, by writing your tests like this, you can have much more robust tests that are less likely to fail randomly on you. So I hope that sample test was useful to you. Obviously, there's many other things you can do with RTA, but that gives you an idea of some of the things that are possible with it. If you are interested in getting involved, helping out, we're always looking for more help. You can go to the Roku Developer Slack. It's probably the best spot if you're not already on there. We're under the RTA channel. Also, if you need help with figuring out, you're getting stuck on something, feel free to post in there as well. If you do see some issue with RTA, feel free to post a GitHub issue. And some of the things I wasn't able to cover, such as saying if the GitHub actions are on there or things like that. If those are things you're interested in trying to figure out, feel free to post on the RTA Slack channel as well, and we can discuss those there. But yeah, hope this was helpful to you, and hope you can get some value out of RTA.
All right, so we are going to jump into questions. Thank you so much for that presentation, Brian. So starting at the top, we've got a question from Bronley. Can you run these tests from CI/CD GitHub action flows? And how do you handle those runners accessing Rokus?
Yeah, so I wasn't able to cover it for time, and I won't go too in depth here. But essentially, you're using GitHub self-hosted runners. Those are hosted on a network locally with Roku setup on there, and so you're basically setting that up, and then the GitHub self-hosted runners talking with GitHub. Obviously, you could do it with other platforms as well. There's similar things for Bitbucket and stuff like that. But essentially, it's definitely possible and currently doing that, for our apps.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Is RTA framework evolving? Any new features we should be excited about?
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of goes back to my point in the presentation of, I'm the main one that works on this. We'd love to have more people involved. It spend a good amount of time on it, but obviously I am time limited. So I have a huge list of things I'd love to add. One of the ones I definitely want to add in the near future, actually two of them. One is the auto injection, like I was mentioning in the presentation. And the other one is the ability to use the new ECP launch beacons to make it a little easier for writing tests. And the other thing is that would be beneficial for how we use it in VS Code for the Roku automation panel there to be able to have an easier and way to do that. So yeah, definitely tons of stuff we'd love to do, but just having the manpower to do it.
Okay, awesome. Our next question, debugging failed tests. Any pro tips for quickly identifying whether it's a test issue or an actual app bug?
Yeah, so that one's a little bit tricky. One thing that is helpful is if you're able to at least do screenshots of the test while it's running. We currently do that. Um, Also, if you can actually get to where one of my goals is to eventually have video recording of it, that's helpful. The thing that gets a little tricky sometimes is these tests run so fast that you don't know if it's just if it's just an edge case or like that. So you can step through the code, and so that's the one thing I would recommend to try and do. If you set it up in VS Code, you can set a debug statement and just press play, as you go through, and you can see it advance. But again, going back to the tester so fast, you might still have edge cases where the because it's so fast is what's causing that. But that's always my first thing is trying to step through it and see what's going on there to try and figure that out.
Okay, awesome. All right. How are you handling authentication flows in your automated tests?
Yeah, so I would say you generally are going to have maybe a test for sign up and a test for sign in. Those are your only manual tests where you're actually using the interface. Otherwise, generally you want to be handling a lot of stuff off the device if possible. With a computer's obviously going to be way faster, and then you're basically just injecting that into the registry or like that on boot up so that you're already in that type of state, so you're not having to deal with that. I hope that fully covered that.
Okay, awesome. Next question, is sleep really the only way to wait for certain results? That sounds very dodgy. What in case of intermittent network issues or another hangup?
Yeah, so I think this might have been asked during the initial version of the test or like that, and that is kind of the example of like a lot of test frameworks, that is how it kind of works, and you end up having really slow tests because of that, because you have to cover those type of edge conditions. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of false failures. So yeah, I mean, in general, we try and avoid sleeps as much as possible. It's much easier to write a test with a sleep, but if you can set up the observers and stuff like that and understand using the tooling and VS Code and like that, you can write a much more robust test that's not going to fail, as in the example of like when I was running, obviously it ran different speeds each time. But it didn't matter what speed it ran at, it still was just waiting for the observer to kick in. So whenever possible, either using observers or the other thing we'll start doing is just using a while loop and calling get value repeatedly on the device. Both of those work much better than sleep. And yeah, I try to avoid sleeps as much as possible.
Okay, great. All right, next question. How are you structuring your test code to keep it as maintainable as your app grows?
So I think this one's kind of a bit dependent on your application or like that. Um, One thing I did mention, obviously, with the elements having like a central spot for that is definitely a really good thing. But from like your actual test structure, that's something you kind of have to come up with. A lot of times you're going to have QAs going to have some type of something they're using behind the scenes. So that's a pretty good way to structure it if possible, is kind of tying those together, because that's also going to make it much easier for QA to understand what this test case is for. So that's probably the best thing I can say. Yeah, well, that's kind of dependent on your application structure.
Okay, awesome. Our next question, error handling and tests. How granular do you go?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they mean by this. Maybe they mean like of knowing like if it's a failure. Yeah, it's one thing with at least with Mocha like that. I've noticed like the default messages can be a little confusing what it's actually saying. So at bare minimum, a simple um check there or a simple message of actually giving like a better description of what the actual issue was. That's definitely helpful. I'm not sure if there was something else they were trying to say there. But trying to catch as early as possible is also another thing. 'Cause you can kind of if you're not checking things as you go, you could get to a really later state. And that's actually not where the issue was. It was actually way earlier in the test. You just weren't checking things properly.
Okay. We've got a couple more minutes left. We've got two questions asking if RTA is the same as Roku Robot Framework.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is that the one Roku's internal solution? It definitely RTA is its own separate thing. Yeah, it's not part of, yeah, they are separate.
Yeah. Okay. Um, how are you structuring your test code to keep it as maintainable as your app grows? Oh, actually, I
Yeah,
think I
it
just,
does the same.
all right.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Um, do you have a tutorial on setting up the programs to make the tests?
Um, so I mean, that really kind of, this kind of was that tutorial a bit. Obviously, I think a lot of this is, the thing I can say is, try to get up to speed with the documentation that's there. And if there is things where you're getting stuck on, the Roku Slack and the RTA channel is really the best spot to go. And going back to the point of those that want to volunteer their time, if somebody wants to write a tutorial for that, that would be awesome. As I said, that's one of those things that's kind of the lowest priority for me when there's the cool things to work on. So.
Totally understandable. Okay. We have got, are there limitations on testing payment flows since we can't access pay over sideloaded apps?
Yeah, so that definitely is possible. I think what they're probably running into there is there's a lot of stipulations you have to have set up properly in order for it to work when sideload, uses billing channel and things like that signed in to the correct root account login on the Roku device or like that. So I think that's what they're running into there. Um, the one thing you might have a little bit of is the PIN code and stuff like that. That's actually one of the few spots where we do still have to use sleeps, is some of the Roku overlays because we don't know when those are actually showing. But yeah, on the whole, yeah, definitely have written tests like that before.
Okay. And then everyone's favorite question as an open source developer, our last question that we've got, how can I get involved?
Yeah, so either on the npm or the GitHub page, there's the contributing there. Yeah, definitely, reach out either on GitHub with an issue, or if there's something you want, just make an issue for, and we can get in touch. Or again, the Roku Slack RTA.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Brian, for helping us walk through this, answering these questions. And we are now going to break for lunch. So thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you all back here in about an hour.